I think the only way to describe my emotions to the return of World Trigger today is just a big smile on my face. I mean, I'm sure you all are aware on just how excited I have been for the third season to return, and we have finally made it to that first promised Saturday. And again, just off the bat, I'm going to give a huge thanks to Toei Animation, just keeping that consistency with the art and the animation, and just all the hard work they've been putting into the series till now. It's truly remarkable to see World Trigger make such a large comeback after its initial season 1 on hiatus, and just truly brings me to an enormous amount of joy. Now, starting with episode 1 and the opening, this is by far my favorite one. I mean, World Trigger has gradually outdone themselves, but this one takes the cake, and I'll be making a separate video breaking down this opening and just all the things within it, but the feels are huge with this one. So props to the group who did this music, and I'll make sure to get their proper band name by the time I do that opening breakdown video. So with the actual content of episode 1, we are picking up right where season 2 left off, with Hyusei making it into the B rank and his skills as a Kogetsu user being pretty up there amongst some of the best fighters in Border, which isn't surprising because we gotta remember who his teacher was, and Visa was the one that sharpened his skills from a young age, and for a while was also giving Kuga a hard time back in season 1 during the invasion arc. I'm excited to see all the swordplay that comes out from Hyusei, especially in the upcoming fights, and I have full faith that the choreography will be consistent. Now we are introduced to two new characters this time around, Cronin and Yuri, both seniors of Tamakoma's juniors, and we've seen some of the more interesting backstory revealed in this episode as well, and most importantly, it's important that you guys continue to pay attention to these two new characters as well, because once we get into their backstory, things will start to tie in as the series continues. I had the biggest grin seeing Reiji, the usual composed and strong man himself, in an absolute panic and jumpy state over Yuri. Even Chika taking note of what's going on got a good laugh out of me. Again, I would definitely make sure to pay attention to these two characters throughout the season as new information comes along, especially with the return of some characters from season 2. Now moving into the rank war related things, let's talk about Hyusei's trigger set for a second. So we already know that things like Kogetsu, Bagworm, and Shield are the given for the general attacker set. We also see him having Viper on his trigger, which isn't too much of a surprise given his Lambus trigger is another type of trigger that requires intense control, and it's also something he can get used to with his horns given the enhanced Trion buff. Viper to me is definitely the playmaker set of bullets since you can curve them at an angle, and if you remember in earlier episodes, Hyusei was saying that there will be moments he will decide his own plan of action. But that clearly means that just in battle experience alone, Hyusei clearly knows what he needs to do depending on the opponent in front of him. And in order to secure those points, something that will allow him to get the job done like Viper bullets is definitely the right call for his trigger set. Now, I think the most interesting trigger we see Hyusei select for his trigger set is definitely him using the Escudo, and it's also the same barriers that trapped him back in season 1 when he fought Jin. We know that Escudo can be summoned from the ground as long as that individual is in Border's parameters, but since it's the rank wars, it won't really matter because the map itself is generated within Border's HQ. I think that this without a doubt will be the most surprising thing to see when it comes to Hyusei's fighting style. His Lambus trigger had a very heavy stance on offense and defense, and this Escudo combined with Viper can somewhat replicate that style in Border's version, so it's going to be really exciting to see how things turn out, especially with nobody knowing what Hyusei has equipped and how strong he really is. Because if he's fighting up there with Ikuma and Tachikawa, then I can safely assume that for the most part, he's in a nice position to go against people like Ko and Kage. Now in terms of world building and some surprising backstory lore into the origin of Border and Tamakoma, this episode brings a lot of it and still holds a lot of weight for future events in the manga in my opinion. With Mikuma moving into the branch's dorms essentially, we see that the room he moves into is Commander Kido's old room. And when you think about it, it makes sense that Tamakoma and Kido have some old connection because Tamakoma is always having some special things going on with the housing neighbors and the whole Black Trigger fiasco back in season 1 when Yuma first arrived. Now the most important details here however are definitely the story elaborated upon by Yuri and what happened with the original Border members and how things came to be now. If you look into the opening, you see that Jin had a Kogetsu that eventually turned into Fujin. That small moment is so huge here in the story, learning about the significance of Tamakoma's emblem and what it stands for. Now there are 3 nations that even right now we still haven't met with our current crew that are essentially allies of Tamakoma, and we can see that through the emblem as at the top there are 3 circles representing those 3 nations with Border in the center and Tamakoma at the bottom. Yuri explained that there was a big battle that took the lives of 10 entire members, which honestly explains why Kido is always so pissed off and also gives some context as to why he strained so far from Tamakoma. Their sacrifice paved the way for Border to grow, because of Kido's conviction of the neighbors are our enemies message that of course gained support especially after every invasion is stopped or destruction ensues. Now, it's probably been a very long time since these allied nations have come into contact with the Earth crew, but I feel as if we do have another big battle on our hands someday down the line, just like this one. I expect the allies to be a giant handful of characters adding into the roster that we already have right now, and a great Trion war to ensue on the Earth this time around, especially if it's led by After Couture or even allies of them. This was definitely a story Mikumo needed to hear though as a leader, and to develop his feelings towards neighbors that he might meet down the line, for instance, and he might be the one to help gain Tamakoma more allies, as he's shown he's got quite the way with words. The way this episode foreshadowed these types of events and broke down this information was done really well and very much needed. World Trigger has a lot of fighting going on recently, and it's good that before we get back into the rank wars, that the appropriate amount of time is taken to elaborate and expand upon world building and the important characters in the background. Other than that, this episode was a great way to get back into the season. I certainly missed the cast, and again, the opening song really made me happy with the long wait, and I'm very happy to be a World Trigger fan today. So that wraps up my episode 1 review. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more World Trigger content, then make sure to like and subscribe if you so kindly could on your way out. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you all in the next World Trigger episode.